So I think what we did when we started this unit last week, we basically looked at the unit which is operation management. We looked at a bit of an overview to try and understand, why do we study operation management specifically within the remit of business and management in general. And then we also discussed very briefly things like, what does it constitute of in terms of, what does it consist of? When we say the word operation and when we say the word management, sometimes it's easy to get confused in terms of, why are these two terms used and why are they used interchangeably? So operation management is a larger or a bigger term, and it kind of includes, the set of basic daily activities that most of us do when we work within a particular department or a division within the business. And we did take up an example of, say for example, we looked at different organizational charts of, 2 or 3 different kind of sectors like airline in general, banks in general. Also ended up discussing, the educational bit to understand which and what particular part within, which function and what particular function within the business is directly related to operation management. We also, towards the end, looked at going through some of the bits in terms of how, costs are calculated. Why do we look at basically the cost and quality triangle, if I did mention that, but primarily alluding to the fact that operation management is all about, looking at shaving off costs without compromising on the quality and trying to meet customer demands. And then we looked at various job roles and, various departments in which we can see a large department like a human resource department, but there will be a subset within the department which basically looks at the roles of, concentrates on the functions of or the roles and responsibilities of operations. And then to a certain extent, we also looked at the key job roles which essentially arise when somebody wants to work and, kind of specialize within this function of, management in general, operations management. Now, taking that understanding a bit forward into learning outcome 2, what we want to be able to do is drill down a bit more in detail to differentiate, and kind of, clarify to a certain extent, the role of operations. And for that, what we are going to do is basically pick up an organization. In that organization, we will look at in terms of what does it actually mean. I know a lot of some of these discussions that, when we theoretically read it, talk about this is there, that is there, you have to look at this theory, this model. But the idea today would be to try and understand with an example of what do we actually mean when we look at operations. So this is what we're going to drill into today, and the idea would be by the end of this session, at some stage, what we will have is a very clear understanding of, the role of operations within a organization. So if somebody is to ask this question, what is the role of operations in, say, Rochdale College, then you clearly know that, okay, I'm going to be talking about these two things, this particular department and this particular job role, which clearly clarifies the role of operations and what it brings to the table when, the institution essentially, say, functions as a college or, as a training provider. And then in the second bit, what we will do is we'll try and differentiate between the bits. We try and differentiate between what is basically look at what is a strategy, and then try and differentiate between the 3 or 4 types of strategies, generally 3 types of strategies which are seen within the organization. So we look at a bit of corporate strategy, functional strategy, and then the operational strategy. So the idea would be to understand and drill down in a bit more detail to directly relate things to the topic, which is operations management. And largely what we are going to do is concentrate on slides and information that I've put into the slides, which is talking about what are the tools or, what are the channels which are used by a particular organization to look at, achieving operational efficiency or, meeting the operational performance targets which are set by the management. So let's get into it, and as always, stop me or ask me any questions on any of the slides that you would want to, and I'll take it up from there. Now, what I've done is in this version, which I'm going to upload just after the session today, there are some bits that I've added to the slides just to make the topic and the content a bit more current. And the idea would be there will be some slides which have, what you call the slide notes, which will hopefully help you in looking at doing the assignment tasks. So I've put in some pointers with regards to things like identify the links and, where is the conflict. Now, one of the key things that we start up with in the learning outcome 2 is, first things first, what we want to be able to do is understand. I know that everything looks quite usual, everything is working as usual. But can we think of maybe a few areas wherein people who work within the operations team find it difficult to work with, staff or people in the other teams? Can you think of conflict areas? Because everything seems to be hunky-dory, that it's working out fine, but I'm pretty sure when a lot of departments, a lot of teams work together, there are always conflicts which happen. And at some point in time, somebody from the management steps in and says, okay, let's look at this. Let's step back and look at this in a very structured way. This is your role. This is their role. This is what you need to do. This is what they need to do. This is what your output should be, and this is what their delivery should be. Have you come across something?
Sorry. So maybe are you talking around like maybe time conflict if one department's relying on another department and if perhaps department A runs over and isn't able to produce their part quick enough, and then that would have a knock-on effect on the next department.
That is correct. So in general, when we look at conflicts, what we will get to see is that within conflicts, these can happen between various departments like HR, marketing. It can mean that there's a bit of finger pointing which happens. You need to do this, you need to do that. But when you're right on that when you say that. So it could be different types of conflicts. So one of them could be time conflicts in terms of delivery. What could be the other conflicts that you think of? So time conflict could be leading to a slower delivery time or a faster response time. It can have both the meanings or different types of connotations. So sometimes you will see that if things are required to be done in a quicker way, sometimes they look at a bit of a compromise on quality, or it could be compromise on quality, but it will help us or help the organization save a bit of cost. So sometimes these things have to be looked at from a point of view of rationalization, and that is where we get to see the idea of conflict actually occurring, wherein to a certain extent a bit of blame game starts to happen, that okay, no, I did this, but this was because of them, and they decided to do this, and this was not a part of the role. So an example that I would give out here, just to clarify this, would be, say, two departments which we normally look at. So I think when we look at sales, business development, marketing, or something which is account management, they're all part of same marketing. And when you look at this department and you look at the other departments which are inwards to the organization, which are administration, production, engineering, they all come under the umbrella of, say, operations, because at the end of the day, what they are doing is, from a support function point of view, they're trying to meet the customer's need and demand, which has been, kind of put forward to them, saying, okay, this needs to be produced, and this is a specification, and this is what will need to be delivered at this point in time. But that part of the decision-making thing in terms of what the price is, delivery is, or the time frame is typically done by the front-end departments, things like sales, marketing. So what we get to see when we see conflicts which occur between, say, operations and the marketing functions, you're likely to see that there are times when operations wants to concentrate on satisfying and meeting every requirement of customers, whereas marketing would usually focus on things which are primarily to do with quicker delivery, better quality, or getting more volumes from customer in terms of generating more profits and obviously looking at more sales. So there is always this tussle which tends to happen between various. If it's a large organization, you will get to see this bit of tussle or conflict happening between the departments, wherein there's a bit of a pressure on the operations team or the operations department in general to be able to deliver, but also deliver in terms of without any compromise on time, quality, and also cost, because operations department is generally directly responsible for also looking at economizing the operational cost which is used to produce a set of goods given to the customers or meeting the requirements of customers. So this is a function that we do get to see, that there is conflict which doesn't generally plays a big role if the standard operating procedures or documented procedures and policies are not there when we consider talking about operations role. So here the key thing is that whenever we look at talking about operation, and the reason why I brought this up was that operations typically, anybody who works within operations will always ask for a defined job description or a very clear, non-ambiguous job description or a role, because their role when somebody works within that function is to provide support for a differentiated, basically provide support to, deliver a particular product or services, which is being ordered or, placed as an order, or sales and marketing department will procure that order or whatever it is. And the other thing that we look at is sometimes when you look at operations in general, a lot of companies which are dealing with producing goods and services, they tend to talk about or harp about the fact that their services are quite distinctive because their practices in operations allow them to create that distinction or differentiation, which will help market, the products and services more effectively for the organization towards the consumers. So when we talk about, and if I just elaborate this slightly and I talk about, say, for example, let's look at an example of EasyJet. Now, why do we think that we look at a bit of, why does EasyJet, for example, let's look at it from a company's perspective first, is able to claim that we carry so many million passengers every year and we have this much, flying time, experience and all that. And this then gives confidence to its customers to be able to, book or rebook and fly with them again and again. So the question of reliability and the question of getting confidence on EasyJet or Ryanair, whichever airline we pick up, which is a low-cost airline, we do get to see that they have created this distinction of getting you to a destination on time at a certain cost, which other airlines are not able to meet. And this is a point which they kind of advertise or harp upon because they talk about something called operational efficiency. They talk about that we have everything in place in terms of our operations, which allows us to create this bit of competency. And this is something which is difficult for other competitors to match. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we talk about in general, the role of operations, we talk about two things, that the various set of activities which the company does to deliver goods and services at some stage, if it's an organization which is producing or offering goods and services on a mass scale, will need to create some sort of a differentiated strategy or a differentiation basis the features and functions of the product, which allows it kind of go across to the market or go to market with a bit of distinction as compared to its competitors. So here there is a direct play or a direct involvement of operational teams or people which work within operational teams which work together to streamline processes and streamline, various, let's say, methods which are used to operate and deal with customers, so that it creates efficiency within the organization. Now, from an organizational point of view, that efficiency would mean that they would be able to save cost or maybe make more profits. They'll be able to serve more customers or produce more goods and services from the same natural resources or resources that they're using. And from a customer's perspective, that means there's a bit of a confidence building which happens, and you then tend to kind of have that reliability being built in with an organization which the consumers are using time and again, and that kind of brings in confidence, reliability, and trustworthiness. And this is distinctively happening because of the operational role or the operations of the company, the streamlining that they are doing in terms of operations of the company to continuously change activities, monitor activities, so that they end up really, delivering the desired results for which these activities or the policies or guidelines have been set. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now, that is what I've explained in this particular slide. This strategy is more about, concern with the actions of the organization in order for them to survive and prosper in an environment over long term. So when we talk about operational strategy, before we talk about that, what we want to be able to do is understand the definition of, the strategy as a term. And strategy as a term has its origination from military or, from armed forces. And really there is, when they look at, you have to look at going against the enemy, and for which they need to create a plan. And that planning operational bit to kind of have everything work at pinpoint accuracy was something which led to the creation of something called a word called strategy. So it's all about concerning, how the actions of the organization would help it prosper and survive in an environment over long term. So when we look at, say, for example, consumer organizations or retailers like ASDA, Tesco, Sainsbury, and all these guys, they think of planning something which is a series of activities. Their planning typically tends to be 3 to 5 year or even 10-year long, because as business operations have grown, as their operations have grown, that means they have a number of stores, they have a number of locations, they have operations in number of countries. The terms that we use to describe sometimes when we talk about these is that because they have become so big, and if they have to change their direction of business or bring in a change in the business, they need to bring in a change which happens primarily in the operational side of things first, from within the organization, for it to be reflected outwards. And because this change requires a longer duration, or the planning for this particular change requires a number of years for it to be implemented, this then constitutes something print or a document which can be termed as strategy. Is that okay? Now, when we look at linking this term strategy to, say, operations strategy, is because you can think of, there are 3 levels of strategy which I'll come to in the next slide, and they look at corporate strategy, we look at business strategy, and we look at functional strategy. So which part of the strategy do you think will be more or less linked to operations?
I would say probably the functional. I'm tempted to say business, but I'd say probably the functional.
I think that is correct. So when we look at, when I talked about the fact that, okay, they make 3, 5, 10-year plans, this is talking about corporate strategy. So where will they see the business in 10 years? Sometimes we do get to see this question which is being asked during the interview processes: where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years or 2 years or 5 years? Now, these are things which they look at it from a strategic point of view. And the strategic point of view is that they want to look at matching the personal vision or the objectives of the person with the objectives and the vision of the company. And that is why sometimes you get to see that these questions are asked, because they want to see if the person is too ambitious, if the person is going to be coming in and settling in. And sometimes when you relate this, that's how strategies within the organizations are also formed. Is they look at corporate strategy, which is long term. You look at business strategy, which is more or less medium term. That means they're looking at addressing the current challenges, but within that, in order to address each of these challenges separately and then overcome those challenges, what they look at is a functional strategy or a operational strategy. So corporate strategy would look at answering questions like, where will the business be in 10 years, for example. Like Marks and Spencer has restructured his business in the last couple of years, and they put something called Plan A. And that vision is to be achieved by 2020, because the whole organization is changing in terms of its business model, launching the internet as a major channel for selling, or reaching out to consumers. They are concentrating and consolidating certain businesses. So they are looking at, consolidating businesses on the, say, for example, retail outlet side, clothing, for example. But they are going big time onto food business or fooding, and, the business on which they serve the restaurants, and those kind of things they are going, and then international expansion. So corporate strategy is all looking at long term, whether they are acquiring, changing, divesting. When we look at Sainsbury's, they acquired Argos. The reason they looked at it was, in the long term, they feel they have not made a significant dent in the electricals, electronic, telecoms market, which is a big, money earner in terms of revenue for most of the retailers. Tesco got into it a couple of years back. ASDA got into it a couple of years back, but they have kind of got left out within the big 3. So these are things which happen in the corporate strategy. But when we look at business, they are looking at competing against each other. So they're looking at immediate objectives of how does the revenue increase this year, how does the turnover profitability increase this year, and the mission or the objectives set by the management on an yearly or an annual basis need to be reviewed and achieved, and that is what will concentrate on something called business strategy. And in operational or functional strategy, what we are looking at is they are looking at optimizing and optimizing a set of activities which will help them achieve those larger objectives. So the functional will contribute into business, the business will contribute into corporate. So when we look at it from a pyramid point of view, the corporate will be on the top, and the business will be in the middle, and the functional will be the bottom portion of the pyramid, which is the biggest, because most of the operational strategy would involve large number of people working within the organization, a lot of resources being used to produce goods and services, and that is when we look at a change being implemented. When I say the change like Plan A 2020, the main set of change which Marks and Spencer looked at was they wanted to change the business from brick and mortar model, just having retail stores across high streets, to getting onto internet or e-commerce based retailing. That is something which they changed, and that happened because of the use of various enablements which allow them to bring in this operational efficiency or look at moving the business into a particular direction. And in this case, the word is technology. So they adopted internet as a technology to be able to reach out to customers, and this is something that we will look at in the subsequent slides. So in general, these are things that we look at which are predominantly how we differentiate between operation and strategy. But there is also strategy from an operational department point of view which is put into place, but it is mostly dealing with day-to-day activities, weekly activities, monthly activities. But when we look at business, it's looking at more of an annual view, termly view, like quarterly, 6-monthly, and yearly view. So these are things which we look at when we look at trying to differentiate. And if you're asked a question that what is the difference between a strategy and operational strategy, we need to be very clear. The operational strategy is the set of activities which are put into play, or the policy and guidelines which are written, which primarily make a difference on a daily, weekly, monthly basis at the core activities of the business. But business activities are looking at decisions which are done maybe on a termly, quarterly, or yearly basis, and they make decisions primarily at the departmental level. And when we look at corporate, it is at the business level, or at the geographical level, or at the strategic level, in terms of the business is multinational and across various countries. So this is a key understanding that we need to have within learning outcome 2 going forward. And what we will do is look at, say, for example, what are the various reasons why functional or operational strategy looks at, and we look at a particular model called the 5 operations model, which is set out when we discuss functional or operational strategy. So here, what I mentioned is decisions and actions taken within the operation side of things have a direct impact on the the productivity of the organization. And this would mean that, to give you an example, if we consider, for example, a production floor, and we look at, say, EasyJet as an example that we've picked up today. Now, if they are going to take a decision because of the snow happening, that they're going to cancel flights, this particular decision of cancelling a few flights across airports wherein there's heavy snow and things like that would have a direct operational impact on the serviceability of customers within that particular region. And that would mean it has a direct impact on because of the cancellation of flight, it has direct impact on costs, and obviously direct impact on profitability of the organization. A simple decision here that we look at, which was taken a few months back, or a few weeks back, by Michael O'Leary of Ryanair.
Oh, Ryanair, yeah, with the holidays and
with the holiday thing. So they had messed up on the quotas of the holidays of the pilots, and they decided that, okay, if this is a problem that we need to tackle, we need to do something now rather than do it over a period of time, and that led to a cancellation of about 25,000 flights. So that was direct, action to impacting the operations of the company. So these are things that we need to kind of fish out and see very clearly when we talk about strategy and operations, and where is that operational, where is that decision which is affecting the operational strategy needs to be picked out. So this is a good example, when we look at, in particular, the decision done by Ryanair a couple of weeks earlier. Now, within this, when we look at, understanding where all does because when we talk about operations, when we talk about efficiency, let's take an example of a car. Now, if you are looking at buying a new car, what you tend to do is you will look at certain features, and these features then at some stage you will rank, at different priority when you are looking at making a final decision. Things could be you look at, the overall specs of the car, you look at the price, you look at, the mileage it gives or the consumption, whether it's a petrol or a diesel or an electric that you're considering. And then you look at personal preferences, things like the color and, some of the other gadgetry which is in the car. But when we look at understanding which of these parameters or, which of these points actually conform to operational side of things, you will see that you will quickly narrow it down to saying that, well, what's the engine size? What is the, mileage it gives per gallon or per, per liter? And then to a certain extent, what you will also look at is, things like whether it's a 4x4 off-roader or things like that. And those are things which then come into classifying them as something which is directly related to operations. So here, when we look at that side of things, over the years, what has happened is they've divided and come out with some sort of 5 key things which are involved in the operations, which directly relate to performance of the operational side of things. So when we look at costs, we look at, we look at quality, we look at speed, dependability, and flexibility. So sometimes when you say, okay, I want to reach this place at the quickest possible time. So what you're looking at is if you're flying from Manchester to London, if we do not take costs into consideration, the quickest way would have been probably taking a flight from the airport and then reaching London quickly. But sometimes when you have costs playing in, what you say is, okay, I want to get there as early as possible. I want to avoid the traffic, so train would be a better option. So what you're looking at doing is you're basically looking at the 5 key principal parameters which help you create operational efficiency or help you reach a decision on this side of things in terms of decision making. That what is the mode of transport you will take, how much time will it require, at what time will it reach, how much will it cost, and which one is more dependable. So if you're going across casually with a family, you might say, okay, let's take a road, we'll do a road trip, drive down on a car, but dependability in terms of, driving down might be that you might reach in 4 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, depending on the traffic condition. So speed will go up and down when you're traveling across on the motorway. The quality might not be related. So quality, I could relate it to the cost, and quality will come together when we talk about in terms of the fuel and mileage that you get from when you're traveling. And then the flexibility side of things come in, that you can take a number of breaks across services, or maybe take a detour, go here and go there, and then finally reach your destination. So these are 5 things. If somebody is going to ask you, what are the 5 operational performance objectives that we look at when you work within an operations department? These are things that we talk about, and this is something which is key to application when we talk about when we want to look at increasing productivity or efficiency across any department, across any function, or across any job that we do on this side. Now, this is summarized on this particular table, which basically says if you're looking at costs, most of us will look at low price. Sometimes when you look at mass operations or mass production, the whole idea of company undertaking mass production is that they want to minimize or bring down the cost of the goods. So if you look at a car manufacturer like Toyota, vis-a-vis a car manufacturer like Volkswagen or Mercedes, you'll generally find the Japanese car manufacturers have lower cost in terms of vehicles because the volume for them is larger as compared to the German car makers. But that does not mean that they compromise on quality. So cost is one of the parameters that we look at when we talk about operational efficiency. And generally, if your volumes increase, your cost could go down. So when we look at retailers, sometimes we do find that if you have to order a pizza and you buy a pizza from the fresh bakery or the section within the the retailers, you'll find that to be cheaper as compared to a pizza that you have at Pizza Hut or Domino's. But the quality would vary. So sometimes these are parameters that we have to talk about and we look at specifically from an operational perspective. And this is varying these parameters would give us varying results in terms of the products or services the company produces or offers. So quality would mean generally high quality. When you look at a car, you want German quality, something which comes to your mind. Okay, I look at the Mercedes because, or a BMW or an Audi, because it's generally created and marketed from a point of view of that we are probably we focus on high quality. It could be other car makers, which is Porsche, for example, earlier British, but now owned by Volkswagen. So if you look at a faster car, a sports car, you would want quality, and you would probably go in for a Porsche or a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. So these are things which they will look at in the business, that we do not want to go mass, we do not want to produce volumes. At the same time, what we want to do is produce quality, and because their focus is on quality, when you look at the Maybach, the Bentleys, and the Rolls Royce, they produce lesser number of cars, or maybe 5 to 10,000 cars a year, but they are very much focused on quality. And there, the key focus on operational side is quality as a factor, nothing else. Is that okay? Yeah, so these are things that we can look at from a different aspect with different examples within an organization. And you will always see that when we talk about the operational excellence, efficiency, productivity, we will see these 5 factors coming into play. And depending on the type of business, the type of products and goods and services you're producing, you will see that they will be on play. So some of them will be high priority, some will be low priority. Now, this is an example of a chart of Wal-Mart and how they look at operational strategy working within their stores. So their tagline, if you look at ASDA, is low prices every day. That's their tagline. That is their headline, that okay, we help you save price on every product, and we try and bring you the lowest prices every day on every products that you buy. So here, their focus on operational strategy is when they look at producing or providing goods to customers within the store, they look at what you call low inventory levels, or something that we will come across also in the future sessions will be something called just in time. So the inventory is stored, which they buy inventory, and the warehouses have inventory, which is primarily looking at replenishing stocks across the store on a daily, weekly basis. And some of their suppliers, when they deal with, their idea is that they do not want to have a lot of stocking internally. They want the stock to just arrive in time for that to be delivered to the stores. And in some of their cases, some of their suppliers are now also supplying to the stores locally. So they are going into the regional hubs, and these regional hubs would kind of then supply to the stores in that particular region. And the idea there is, because it's a very, very, very large operation and a global operation, they have to focus on operations to be able to shave off costs or reduce costs in every place possible. And in their case, a large amount of cost typically is spent on distribution. So the goods and products and goods or services actually move from one place to the other. It could be landing at the port, going into a regional warehouse, from there going to another regional warehouse, and from there going to the store. So in order for them to reduce costs, the stock landing up at the dock could directly be going into the stores, would help them shave off costs on transportation, distribution, and things like that. So there are lots of these strategical decisions which are done by people in supply chain and logistics, which is one of the key departments which is operations, to look at minimizing cost when we look at large operations like Wal-Mart or ASDA in this case within the UK. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Right. Now, one of the key things which I have looked at is I've kind of looked at a bit of a case study which is on EasyJet. And just to highlight and explain what we've been discussing today, this would help us cover some of the key aspects of, why do we look at differentiation? Why do we look at how do we differentiate operational versus corporate strategy? And then what are the key things which are at play, which are essentially called, the enablements which allow the organization to actually achieve this efficiency or actually reduce cost of operations or reduce cost. So we know that, just as a background, this is a bit of a reading stuff, but just we know at a background that, EasyJet started off in 1995. They had predominantly only a few routes up until the last few years. But after starting operations, they did not provide much of travel across various destinations. But in the last 10 years, they added most of the destinations within UK and outside the UK as well. And that led to the large scale expansion of the organization. And today it is one of the most successful low cost airlines anywhere in the world. They have their competitor, which is Ryanair. Some of the figures mentioned here. So, for example, when we look at, they flew 68 million passengers, but last year they flew 81 million passengers. But Ryanair still remains as the number one low cost carrier, because I think they flew about 118 or 110 million passengers last year. So, which is subsequently quite as compared to EasyJet, they are obviously in quite a dominant position. Now, the key reason of looking at EasyJet is, why do we think EasyJet is able to offer some of these services which other airlines are not able to offer? Airlines like Lufthansa, Air France, British Airways, or some of the other well-established airlines which have been going for so long. Why do you think they have not been able to meet up or kind of offer the same prices as what Ryanair and EasyJet provide?
Well, I'm presuming they must keep their operational costs in the first place to be able to offer flights for the prices they do. But to be honest, I don't know. I don't think I've ever really thought about it enough.
Right. Okay. I think the key word that you used, which summed it all, was that yes, they have been able to, over the years, understand the business model and then reorient their operations to suit the business model which is relevant for customers. As what we have seen is, over the years, obviously airline travel has been increasing year on year, but we get to see that the major set of changes tended to happen after, the dot-com bubble in 2000, wherein a lot of airlines came, and they started to launch low-cost operations. And that is where we do get to see the likes of EasyJet, which came into business, and, they kind of surfaced up. But their major expansion happened as they gained a bit of confidence, built a bit of reputation, and then they started to expand, because they did feel that just offering services within the UK market might not cut it, and they decided to expand and go global. So what they did was they went into large-scale European operations, which was funded by banks and things like that. So having said that, if we look at why they are able to offer some of the services, and let's look at the nitty-gritty of why they are able to offer low cost. So if I have to fly from Manchester to Basel, for example, or Zurich, you can take a flight from EasyJet, which will cost you for a single trip maybe 49 to 69 pounds. But if I have to take the same flight from Swiss Air, or say, for example, from British Airways, that flight would be in excess of 200 pounds. The difference that they have been able to make, and if we look at it a bit more carefully, is because things like you can book your tickets online. You do not need to.
So they've taken all the cost out, like the frills out, haven't they?
That is correct. Spot on. So they've done away with the ticketing agents, for example. They've embraced the use of internet and technology, which means they've cut out the middlemen. They have looked at things like, paperless, so for example, you print your own boarding pass when you come in, and, there are no frills in the, no food if you tend to have a refrigerator, you have to basically look at, paying for it. So there is no in-flight, as we say, entertainment or, facilities provided as against the other airlines which would provide. Now, what they realize is that because these are short-haul flights, or these are 2 hour or less than 2 to 3 hour flights, they decided that we are going to take a gamble, and what we're going to do is we're going to entice the customer by offering a ridiculously low price. But this low price can only be achieved if they look at achieving some operational efficiency. And the things which they cut expenses on, or costs on, let's put it this way, is basically nothing but they have achieved something called operational efficiency. And why they did that was without compromising on the seating, for example, the time in which you reach the destination, What they did was they looked at some of the other aspects. So what they did was they cut out the middleman first, use the internet, embrace the technology after the dot-com bubble, and what that has helped them do is offer cheaper pricing because they've done away with intermediaries which were charging 10%, 12%, 15% on their ticket prices. The third is, in some cases, if you look at the current times, you don't even need to print out your boarding pass. You can have an app of EasyJet on your phone or Ryanair on your phone, and that itself, when you book a ticket, it sends a copy of the boarding pass onto your phone, and that itself allows you to do pretty much a ticketless air travel. That means we've done away with most of the things which are required. Even on that side, they send you a confirmation on the email. You ask, sometimes when you book a ticket on the train, they will say, do you want a ticket? You want to collect it from the ticketing booth, or do you want to get a message on your phone which is going to be good enough for you to show that it's a mobile ticket? And those are ways wherein the operational efficiency is being achieved even using technology. So sometimes you are able to save on the cost of printing a paper, the tickets itself, and you just send a text code or a barcode, and that barcode appears when the ticket is due, and it disappears or it kind of vanishes when the ticket or the utility of that particular ticket has been, done away with. So things like use of internet, ticketless travel, no onboard catering, efficient use of the spots that they've got or slots that they have at the airports in terms of, managing time. Like check-in times on usual flights are 3 hours before the flight leaves. But in most cases, what they do is they do the pre-screening by saying if you have no baggage or you have only a cabin baggage, you can check in half an hour even or 45 minutes before the flight is even taken off. So that would mean the slots that they have, they are able to operate more flights, and it reduces queuing and all those things happening within the airports, which are busy airports. So these things have helped them cut costs, and these costs which have been cut have been passed on as benefits in terms of lower prices to customers, and that's why this has become a very popular or a sought after airline, when we look at traveling to Europe or destinations within Europe, because what we do see is, okay, it's a short haul flight. I don't need all these frills and benefits. I think it's the cost that I need to, look at. And in those cases, what you do is you choose that option of Ryanair and obviously, EasyJet.
Amazingly as well, all the things that they've implemented to save us customers money, they're also more convenient for our customers as well, aren't they? So not only are we getting it cheaper, it's much more convenient.
Convenient as well, yes. So they have opened up, some of these airlines have taken up slots in different airports, which are smaller airports like in the Leeds, Liverpool airports, or, when we look at other cities, and that has led to more connectivity and more people flying. So they have kind of grown the market as well as against most of the larger airlines operating from major airports within the UK. So these are things which have been brought in, and this is all nothing but operations and operational strategy. Now, the next few slides, which basically are there, as long as you've understood the concept, the next few slides actually talk about each of the things that we've discussed, what EasyJet has done. So, for example, embracing technology. Embracing technology means that they are able to reach out to more customers, and they are kind of able to, provide some of these things simultaneously as against an agent only selling tickets for a particular location. But if you're advertising on the internet, you can show all your destinations, show all your, flight slots, and then the customer has the freedom. And that would mean that you are reaching out to more customers because it is happening in real time. So operational efficiency also talks about the use of technology, specifically the internet, because all the things can be provided in real time. You can see the results of activities happening almost instantly. An example that I would give here is, if you look at Amazon and if you have that app on your phone, what you do is when you buy something on Amazon, pretty much in 3 or 4 clicks from choosing the product to clicking the checkout and paying, what happens is you get pretty much a lot of things done simultaneously. If you visualize that, what tends to happen is you choose a product, you like it, you add it to the basket, and then you proceed to check out and you press pay for buying the product because you have a card or other things stored on it. And the moment you've done that, if within a few seconds you get an email that your order has been placed, and if it's something which is in stock, you get a second follow-up email which comes in from Amazon that your product is currently being dispatched or is being ready for dispatch. And then maybe a couple of hours down the line, you get another email that it is out for delivery. Now, this is nothing but operational efficiency using technology. Okay. And I think it brings out, there is no better example that I can use to kind of bring this out, is because these companies have looked at where the costs can be saved, how quickly the information can be, communicated using internet or technology as a channel and using as a medium. And then this had led to the creation of, allowing them to reach out to more customers, but also allowing them to, kind of save on costs, because it does not require communication happening through various mediums. So it is all happening through the internet, and that embracing of the internet as a medium has allowed them to do some of these things in real time, which means they are happening simultaneously, and the customers are also seeing the results of it, or the end result of it, pretty much in a few, in a span of few hours or few minutes, or in a span of few days in some cases, if it's coming across from outside the UK. Okay, so some of these slides will basically talk about, how, we have looked at internet, for example, as a strategy. The other few slides that I'm going to just quickly skim through would be things like, when we look at how do we create efficiency, how do we look at saving cost, how do we look at speeding up things, how do we look at, for example, in some cases, reaching out to more customers. What we tend to do is we kind of lay it out in different, we kind of break them up into different, let's say, facets. And when we look at operations within a particular department, you will still have an operational element, a marketing element, or a serviceability element. But there are, if I have to knit this all together, what I would see is that the operation side of things will also work. They have to work in tandem with a lot of other departments to be able to finally deliver or service a particular demand from a customer. And this is what we have broken down when we look at, talking about operational strategy with regards to products and services which we have to provide. Now, there are certain concepts or things that we'll work on is when you look at make to order. So in this case, we have to wait for customers' orders to be received before the made to order is done. An example here is, if you're going out to buy a car and you pick up a standard model and you're happy with the certain basic things, then pretty much you can drive out in that car maybe on the same day if everything is sorted, like payment, insurance and stuff. But if you say, I want, a specific type of seat, I want the satellite navigation built in, I want Bluetooth for the telephone, or some of the additional features, and in that case, what will happen is the company will have to take your order, and that will be made to order in your case. And that would have a certain amount of lead time from the time that you placed the order, made a deposit, did the documentation process, but that would be made specifically to your specification as per your order and then delivered to you. So in this case, what we look at is we look at make to order. Similarly, there is something called make to stock and assemble to order. So when we say make to stock, here the products and services are made in anticipation of demand. So when we look at other businesses, say within this car, sticking to the same example of car industry, what you do is when you go onto the showroom to buy a car, you normally see a model which sells quite often and is in demand. They have the maximum amount of stock for that particular model. So if you're looking at buying a Ford, for example, Focus is a very fast-selling model. So Ford Focus is normally in stock. They'll have different colors with it. They'll have a basic variant, and they'll also have an advanced variant, which would mean that they do not make to order this product, but this order is available because it is this product is easily available because it sells more, and because of the previous selling patterns or the previous history of how the car sales are doing with regards to this particular model, the company decides that okay, this is a cash cow model or a main model for their sales, and they make this in huge volumes, and then stock it with what you call dealers, or stock it with the car dealers essentially. So when we look at make to stock, that is the concept. When we look at something which is in demand, the company can anticipate it and then accordingly have enough inventory to service that demand. Because if you do not service that, the customer will go to somebody else and look at an alternative or an option, and that is where you will lose the customer. The third is assemble to order. So here we talk about, because there are lots of variations possible, there is something that can be quickly assembled but does not require the product or the service which is ordered to be manufactured from start. And an example that I would give here would be when we look at Dell computers. Dell became revolutionary in the last decade when they started to give the customers an option on their website to assemble and choose the parts of the computer and then order it to their specification. But that did not mean that they had to go out and make processors, or they had to go out and make the hard drives. And it's the similar case when we look at a company. What they can do is they have all the parts and everything available. They do not have to go and procure the engine or the body or everything required to produce it. What they can do is they can give you the configurator, and with that configurator you can configure the model or the specifications of the model, and then that order can still be delivered to you relatively quickly as compared to going back to the drawing board and then making it, because that's maybe a new variant or a new product, or your specification is something in terms of demand is very different from what they are selling on a volume basis.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I see. I was struggling to see the difference between the make to order and assemble to order, but I understand that now, yeah.
So make to order, when we look at, say, very premium products, like if you end up buying within the car, if I stick to that same example, if you're looking at buying a Porsche, for example, or a premium car like a Mercedes E-Class with a lot of features, in that case, what they will have to do is this will not be stocked as a variant within most dealerships. And what that would mean is that they at some point in time will either have to make a few calls to see if that variant is available, if in that color is available. If it's not, then it's going to be make to order, because that would have a delivery time of 4 to 6 weeks, or in some cases even a year for the car to be delivered. But in some cases, the assemble to order would be that all the basic components and other bits are available, and they have created that particular model itself that it can be configured by the customer, and it is suited for delivery in 4 to 6 weeks as against 4 to 6 months. So when you go out and buy, you will see that difference happening, because they will say, okay, this is available in this variant, this variant, this variant, but they don't give you a choice after that. And this comes with this comes with this, but you can't change much of the things in that. But in an assemble to order, they will give you a base configuration, and you can pretty much chop and change the seat color, the color outside, the specs that you get, the engine size that you get, because they have everything available in terms of length and breadth, and all they have to do is assemble it as per your requirements. So assemble to order would be a good example, would be Dell computers, and make to order would be a premium car brand, like if I have to choose something like a Bentley, or something like a Porsche or a Ferrari, because there's a waiting list and there's a time before you place the order. You might end up getting it in a year, 6 to 9 months, depending on that. So similarly, what we look at is, when we look at that particular jigsaw, and we look at each part of the operational strategy working within each of the strands, what I've done is I've created individual slides here to kind of just focus on. When I look at operational strategy and I'm focusing on just the production bit, I look at processes, or the companies will look, or the organizations will look at processes and technology in general. And within that process and technology, we will focus on project, batch production, mass production, and continuous production. These are various concepts which will come into play when I say I want to look at when I want to look at rationalizing, or kind of streamlining operations within the production department. So what I will look at is, how big is the project or the order. So for example, Nissan, let's stick to the car industry. The Nissan Qashqai, for example, is one of the premium or the quickest selling model for them. Now that's a project wherein they've created a separate factory in Sunderland, and because it is a fastest selling model of Nissan as a car, the 4x4, what they've done is they've said, okay, we have a separate plant for the production of Qashqai, because it's a cash cow, a lot of demand for this particular product, and what we want to be able to do is produce volumes. And because it's a stabilized product, what they've done is they've created a separate factory after doing a lot of investment in creating a production line. And that production line predominantly looks at, in the plant in Sunderland, predominantly looks at producing Qashqai across 2 shifts if they work a 3-shift plant. Now, when we look at batch production, we talk about a lot of different types of models being produced within the same floor. What they would do is they will put in, the operations manager would tell the production manager that, okay, for us today we need to make say 100 cars, and 20 of them will be Qashqai, 20 of them will be Juke, and some of them will be this, some of them will be that. So what they are going to do is use the same resources to optimize the system to produce that in a batch. And the batch production will mean that, okay, in the morning shift, they might end up producing Qashqai. In the afternoon shift, they might go into the Juke model. And in the night shift, they might end up producing something different. But the idea would be they would finish that job before they went on to the next, production order which has come in. Okay? And then when we look at mass production and continuous production, here the model which is selling the most is being produced, and there are certain numbers which have to be produced every day, every week, so that they are able to meet the demand in the market. And that would mean that it does not require a lot of reconfiguration. But here they want to look at achieving a bit of efficiency in terms of making sure that the inventory required for production is available. There is steady demand in the market so that the demand can be serviced. And last but not the least, what they want to be able to look at is they want to kind of mass produce this product so that it's available in the maximum amount in terms of maximum types of variants. And that would mean they're able to service or bring in as many customers under the remit when they want to sell that particular model of that car. And continuous production is something which is, for a model which has been going on for a number of years, there's no change happening or not much being introduced in terms of change, is being looked at continuously, produced, because that model, they see it as a model which will be in demand or has been in demand and will remain in demand going in the future. So these are a few slides which basically we look at just to understand, the various side of things when you go with the operational hat on into various departments to kind of look at, streamlining and ensuring that we are able to meet the demand of the customers, which is currently being, serviced or produced by the activities which the marketing, sales, business management, or other departments within the organization are doing. And these are a few more slides just to explain, with example, what we look at when we look at the concept of process and technology specifically under, production. Similarly, service, and then I would say, similarly, we will go into the last bit, which is capability and, facility. So sometimes you will get to see that within the operation side, what can happen is the plant, we hear a word that the plant is operating at full capacity. Have you come across that term, or at least on the news?
Yeah, operating at full capacity, yeah.
So they're operating at full capacity. The seats have been, NHS, for example, the A&E department is operating at full capacity, and, they have no more room for expansion. So in those cases, what tends to happen is you will typically see that if they have to look at either or situation, what will happen is the management will sit down and will have to make a decision looking at which side of product, if it is taken offline or is not prioritized, could actually still end up achieving the operational capacity in terms of what they want to operate it. Because if you have a factory and a shop floor and that is not working 3 shifts, obviously you cannot work more than 8-hour shifts, but if the business is going well and the demand is there and the products are selling, sometimes you will see that they do not start a second shift or a third shift, is because they feel that if they have to look at operating the plant in a second shift, it is only going to be running for 2 or 3 hours before the order requirement can be met. So here, what they look at is they kind of focus on optimizing, if they have to run it, which particular side of the variant would require that shift to run. Because running it for a full shift for 8 hours would require, the plant working, the staff coming in, everything working as usual. And sometimes they find it's not viable for them to be able to do it. And what they tend to do in that case is if they have to operate that, they'll say, okay, let's look at the wider remit. If your UK region is not able to provide orders, can we look at combining of orders from UK and Ireland to see if the demand is there, then we can run the second shift. Sometimes you will see during seasons or, seasons wherein the sales go up, what they tend to do is they run a third shift because they know that they have to stock and create that capacity, and because there is an appetite in the market for that to be absorbed. So here, the decisions are primarily related to capacity, and capacity decisions are done looking at, the markets, the requirements, the competitors, and sometimes these decisions are strategic in nature because They have to start a shift. That means they have to directly associate that with costs which are incurred and resources which are used, in order to look at, kind of increasing that business. So sometimes management will take a function that, okay, in the case of the educational context, an example would be that you run classes or a batch, say for a particular course like an MBA, during the course of the day, and that's fine. But if the department starts getting demand from a lot of people who want to do evening or part-time classes, what sometimes you will see is there are sporadic demands which come in, but they do not get clubbed together into a batch. And that is where the college or the university would say, okay, it's not feasible for us to run that because we have very sporadic demand and we have very less number of learners, which would mean that if we have to run it, we have to put all the resources in to run it properly. So what they do is they might only take one intake across the year, which would join at a specific time, and that would run for the balance part of the academic year, and continue to kind of look at offering that part-time evening kind of classes. But as against a regular batch which has to be run, most universities would do an intake in February, April, June, July, and even in September when they start the academic year if they are getting a lot of demand for that product. So here, the decision making is done on the basis of how much capacity can they afford, how much staff they can have to run that program, and to a certain extent whether do they have the facilities available to be able to run an evening class or a distance learning class, or is it going to stretch the resources from a point of view of the faculty and the physical infrastructure which is available. Is that okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good stuff. So last bit, again, relating that to human resources, and sometimes, you will get to see, this is something that we've, done probably in our, when we look at a bit of maths, saying that, if there are these many workers, then we can produce this output. If you put in or increase the number of workers, we can probably get more output, and in a quicker or a shorter amount of time. So sometimes you will see operational strategy being employed from a point of view of the human resources, and what they look at is how many people are required to do this task, how many people are required to manage those people at the supervisory level, and what is the number of people required to manage that department at the management level. And sometimes you get this to be implemented within large organizations. A typical example would be retailers, wherein you will see that what they say is that, okay, a particular store, when they look at, say, let's look at an example of Tesco's, a particular store, which is a Tesco Extra or a large store, would require about 250 staff to, kind of offer all the services and run efficiently, on a day in, day out basis. But sometimes you get to see that, what happens is if there are a few employees which end up leaving at the floor level or the shop level, then, or maybe in a particular department like merchandising, shelving, and things like that, what the general manager or the store director does not do is they do not immediately go out and start recruiting, because what they can see is that they can kind of operationalize the efficiency by offering a few extra hours to other employees to be able to pick up that job. But if this is something which is to happen in the long run, they then get into the, what do you call they get into the aspect of doing some training and planning, essentially, not the training, but the right word is planning, to plan out the manpower and the resources required to run it during, say, a Christmas period or busy holiday shopping period. And in those cases, what they will do is they will not make a compromise in terms of hiring the manpower or replacing it if they are falling short of people. So sometimes you get to see that they will also advertise, temp staff vacancies, because they know that they're going to be busy in this season. And that is where the operational part of things are to be looked at. Because of the increased set of activities, increased set of customers within the store, the department or the store department director would have to look at employing more workers, which will need to be trained before the busy holiday shopping or busy holiday season comes in, so that they can get more sales and more profits. And that is where you will see operational strategy happening for HR. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just a couple of slides on that, so obviously you can go through that in a bit more detail. Let's look at summarizing of what we look at today, from learning outcome 2. Now, just to recap, what we want to do in learning outcome 2 is understand and clearly differentiate the role of operations from strategy. And when we do talk about strategy, in what context we talk about is it's called operational strategy. And that is what we've looked at from a point of view of different functions within the organization, wherein we do get to see how the operational strategy comes into play in terms of streamlining and kind of affecting those operations to look at more productivity and more let's put it this way, more productivity and more efficiency. Is that okay? So what we talk about is the 5 possible parameters which are always looked at to discuss and kind of make decision making using that what is going to be important: cost, quality, speed, dependability, or flexibility. And when we use these 5 parameters, we can arrive at a certain type of operations within a particular organization, business, whatever it is. But these are the 5 variables which will be always at play. The second thing that we looked at is when we look at the streamlining of functions between where conflicts can happen. What you have to do is, when we looked at the jigsaw, the idea of looking at that jigsaw is to try and understand which sides of those individual functions will create conflicts with operations. And the idea is to understand the key terms within that field. For example, when we looked at human resources, or when we look at, say, for example, capacity and capability, these are areas which we did talk about when we talk about the areas which can create conflicts. And within these 5 parameters that we talk about, we have to look at using them effectively to do away with these conflicts, but also at the same point in time achieve the objectives set for which which are objectives set by the management. And the last bit that we look at is we look at the various side of operations and what does it involve when we look at understanding each of this in a bit more detail. So things like when we look at strategic decision making, when we look at strategic decision making from an aspect of, say, products and services, what has to be considered. When we look at process and technology, what has to be considered. So these are bits that we need to clearly understand so that we can assess the role of strategic operations or management role within the operations. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. That is where I think we will stop for today's session. And what I will do is just to highlight that this particular handout, which I'm going to show you, is the one which I will ask you to look at primarily, and that is something which I put up across on Moodle.
Okay, because I had printed one off last week, but have you updated it since then?
Yeah, no, that one is obviously there. That will more or less conform to learning outcome 1, 2, 3, no doubt. But this is another one which I've put in specifically, which primarily talks about learning outcome 2. And here is where, some of the bits that I've included into the slide today, you will see that you can actually kind of read a bit more detail into what I've explained using the PowerPoint presentation. So when we looked at the EasyJet case study, things which is operational strategy, the various strands of operational strategy, when we break it down from a point of view of into that jigsaw, that is where this will be a bit of additional reading that you can look at to understand, the difference between operational strategy and overall corporate strategy, and why do we look at, what is the strategic nature of the operational side of things when we look at, working it within a particular organization from an example point of view. Okay?
Great.
Good stuff. I will catch up with you as always next week, and if you have any questions in the meanwhile, do drop me a quick email and I'll come back to you on that some more.
Okay. Next week, I won't be able to do this session next Friday because that's when the funeral is. Would we be able to rearrange, or would we just miss a week? What?
I think what we'll do is we'll rearrange. If you drop me 2 times which are convenient for you, so I could probably look at rearranging that session so that we don't miss out on that week, but at least we can still have a catch up with regards to the third learning outcome.
Okay, lovely. Also, would you be able to send me this recording on the one from last week as well? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely
So I
okay.
can have a recap over the weekend and start on the assignment again.
No worries. No worries. We'll do that today.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Raman. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, Simone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.